Hey there, pirates! Welcome aboard the Anime No Mi channel. When Eiichiro Oda revealed in an interview that if Akainu decided to go after the One Piece, he'd be able to find it in just a year, many fans were shocked. After all, Luffy himself, with all his determination, allies, and countless adventures across the seas, has already taken over 1,000 chapters on his journey and still hasn't reached the Great Treasure. So how could Admiral Sakazuki, better known as Akainu, pull off such a feat in so little time? Oda's statement isn't just provocation, it's a hint at how feared, competent, and relentless Akainu truly is within the One Piece universe. Akainu embodies the most extreme form of absolute justice. Unlike Luffy, who achieves everything through charisma, friendship, and freedom, Akainu reaches his goals through brute force, discipline, and his readiness to eliminate anything in his way. This mindset, combined with the terrifying power of the Magu Magu no Mi, not the Mera Mera, but one of the most destructive and offensive fruits in the entire series, makes him a true war machine. It's no exaggeration to say that he alone could change the fate of an entire island with a single blow. What Oda likely meant with that statement is that Akainu wouldn't waste time. While Luffy gets caught up in side adventures, helps islands in danger, builds alliances, and gets distracted with parties, food, and fights, Akainu would charge straight ahead like a cannonball toward the final goal. No detours, no mercy for enemies, no negotiations with allies. He'd simply crush anyone standing between him and the treasure. And when you think about the Yonko, the closest barriers to the One Piece, it's not hard to imagine Akainu advancing against each one of them without hesitation, destroying their islands, defeating their crews, and seizing territory by force. But here's the real question. Could he actually become Pirate King? Because finding the One Piece isn't the same as being recognized as king. The title of Pirate King isn't just about discovering the treasure Roger left behind, it's about ultimate freedom, about ruling the seas, not just with strength, but with a philosophy that inspires others. Roger, for example, wasn't called king just because he reached Laugh Tale, but because his journey and his legacy inspired an entire era of piracy. Luffy, in the same way, is carving his path not only by defeating enemies, but by inspiring hearts, liberating nations, and building a family of friends and allies who follow him to the very end. Akainu, on the other hand, leads in the complete opposite way. He's respected through fear, not charisma. He's followed through obedience, not love. If he were a pirate, he might actually reach the One Piece in record time, but it's doubtful he'd ever be recognized as the true Pirate King. Since that title requires more than strength, it requires embodying the freedom that the sea represents. At best, Akainu could become the owner of the treasure, or the strongest man on the seas, but not the king. His tyrannical, authoritarian nature would prevent him from earning the respect of the free world. The interesting part is that Oda's provocation also highlights the contrast. Luffy is taking longer, not because he's incapable, but because his journey is built on conscious choices. He always helps those in need. He always takes time to celebrate, and he never runs from side adventures. That delay is what makes his story so grand. Akainu, on the other hand, would speed through the process, but in exchange, his journey would be cold, without bonds, without an inspiring legacy. In the end, he might reach the One Piece, but the world wouldn't call him king, and it would probably reject him as a leader. This shows that Oda's comment is actually both praise for Akainu's power and determination, and a reminder that being Pirate King goes far beyond finding treasure. It's a title that must be earned with spirit, not just blood. If Akainu truly abandoned his position as Fleet Admiral and became a pirate, the entire One Piece world would be thrown into chaos. The image of the man who embodies absolute justice, turning his back on the world government, would be the biggest scandal since Gold D. Roger's execution. That alone would cause a geopolitical earthquake. The Marines' ranks would fall into disarray. Many officers might desert out of fear, or even follow Sakazuki in pursuit of power, and the Yonko would see his shift as a direct threat. As a pirate, Akainu would be the opposite of Luffy. While Luffy gathers people through friendship, trust, and dreams, Akainu would assemble followers through fear and sheer force. He wouldn't need a cheerful crew like the Straw Hats. A small band of loyal or coerced fighters would be enough. It's even possible since some admirals or vice admirals might join him, drawn by the promise of absolute power or simply forced by his overwhelming presence. It would be a cold crew, but a deadly one. The first thing Akainu would do as a pirate is wipe out the biggest obstacles head on. He wouldn't waste time on minor islands or fragile alliances. His logical path would be straight to the Yonko. Kaido and Big Mom are already out of the picture, but Shanks and Blackbeard remain, and it's easy to imagine how Sakazuki would face them. Against Shanks, it would be a clash of ideologies. Freedom, diplomacy, and balance versus ruthless destruction. Against Blackbeard, it would be a battle for the throne of the sea's top predator, and it's not far-fetched to think the brutal power of the Magu Magu no Mi could put Teach on the ropes. If Akainu really defeated Shanks or Blackbeard in a short time, that alone would automatically make him a new Yonko. But unlike the others, he wouldn't rule territories with alliances. He'd devastate entire islands just to keep fear alive. Within months, he could become the most feared pirate in the world. And at that pace, the One Piece would be within his grasp. Oda wasn't exaggerating when he said Akainu would get there in a year. His straightforward logic, brute force, and complete lack of distractions would take him to Laugh Tale quickly. But the big question remains, would he be recognized as Pirate King? The title doesn't just come from reaching the treasure, it comes from carrying the spirit of freedom that the pirate world idolizes. Akainu is the opposite of that. He's the personification of tyranny, someone who wants to impose his will on everyone. So even if he found the One Piece in a year, the world would hardly call him Pirate King. At most, he'd be seen as a tyrant of the seas, an antithesis to freedom itself. And here's the most interesting point. If Akainu went after the One Piece, he would inevitably cross paths with Luffy. And it's exactly in that clash that the true contrast of the story would be revealed. Akainu, with his relentless strength, speed, and military discipline, versus Luffy, with his spontaneity, charisma, and the power of the bonds he's built. Their fight wouldn't just be physical, it would be ideological. What does it mean to be the true Pirate King? Is it about being the strongest or about being the freest? If Akainu really left the Marines and became a pirate, the whole world would collapse. Every month, his movements would hit like earthquakes, shaking the global power structure. Unlike Luffy, whose adventure is full of surprises and unexpected paths, Sakazuki would be methodical, direct, and lethal, crossing off every obstacle that stands between him and Laugh Tale. The first month would begin with absolute shock. News that the fleet admiral had abandoned his post and declared himself a pirate would spread through Morgan's newspapers faster than a Buster call. The world government would try to cover it up, but they wouldn't succeed. Islands across the world would tremble at the idea that the most relentless figure of absolute justice had become the predator of the seas. In that first month, he would assemble a minimal crew, not adventurers, but former Marines and bounty hunters who would have no choice but to follow him. His initial base would be set. Akainu would have already drawn the attention of the Yonko. At this point, it's likely that Blackbeard would be the first to try intercepting him. Teach, always opportunistic, wouldn't let a rival of this magnitude rise without attempting to take him down. A battle between magma and darkness would be devastating, capable of reshaping entire islands. And here's where Oda's prediction starts to take shape. Akainu, fueled by fury and without hesitation, could defeat even a Yonko like Teach. Blackbeard, who plays dirty and relies on his dual powers, might have a chance, but Sakazuki's blind determination, combined with the lethality of his fruit, could decide the fight. If Blackbeard fell in those months, the world would see Akainu as the new supreme predator, claiming the Yonko position faster than anyone ever had. The inevitable focus would then be Shanks. The red-haired pirate is the greatest balance across the seas, the one who prevents unnecessary wars and keeps the scales in relative harmony. Akainu, however, would tolerate no balance. For him, someone is either an ally or an enemy. And Shanks, with his free-spirited, conciliatory nature, would be the greatest ideological enemy. Their clash wouldn't just be about power, but philosophy. The red-haired pirate's freedom versus Sakazuki's blazing tyranny. This battle could last days, maybe weeks, but in a hypothetical timeline where Akainu is destined to reach the One Piece in a year, he would come out victorious. The cost would be astronomical. Devastated seas, burned islands, and an irreparable wound in the world's balance. By then, Akainu would have everything he needs to locate Laugh Tale. And here's the irony. Roger laughed when he arrived because the journey and the companions were the real treasure. Akainu, on the other hand, would arrive alone or accompanied only by terrified followers. The pirate's sacred island would mark the end of his run, but it would bring him no joy, no laughter. It would be only the cold conclusion of an achieved goal. The world would see the announcement, Sakazuki, now a pirate, has found the One Piece. But instead of inspiring a new era like Roger did, he would sow fear and oppression. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.